This is the Ramana Maharshi, 40 Verses on Reality Satsang, a time for self reflection and self inquiry. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. Welcome. I'm a seeker like you, sharing what we love. I've been blessed with years of deep teaching. I bring this to you with this satsang. This week's reading from 40 verses on reality. We're on the second part of the invocation. These are Ramana's words. Those who know intense fear of death seek refuge only at the feet of the Lord, who knows neither birth nor death. Dead to themselves and their possessions, can the thought of death occur to them again? Deathless are they. This shows the basis for Ramana's own realization, which started when he searched within himself for the answer to life and death at the age of 14. He found within himself something which never dies, which was his deepest identity. He was free, free from old ideas, free from gain and loss, free of all possessions, free of the body and the ego. Who dies? The body is born and so must die. Within us, as our very self, is the existence and consciousness that lights up our mind, our senses, and our body. Does existence ever die? Consciousness? Do you die? This body dies. Are you the body? This is worth inquiring into again and again. Ramana said that for most of us, the misidentification with the body is the primary misidentification. Resolve this, and you are most of the way home. When you know yourself as this unlimited existence, consciousness, then of what lasting value is any transient thing? What you have and are is always. You know that you were never born and so will never die. Now, some notes for practice. Do you exist? How do you know this except by your own inner light? Where does this light come from? This is a good inquiry. Who knows this? Knowing this, you find something, not a thing, but consciousness, vast and without boundary. You find your existence, your being, without any individual. It is consciousness being or awareness existence. Being and consciousness are not two separate things, but aspects of one thing that is indivisible. Can you ever find one without the other? Look within and see for yourself. Does this existence ever die? If this is your own nature, do you die? This knowledge leads to freedom and peace. How can you want anything particular since you are vast and partless? No separation means that there is no other thing to want. Now, on to our videos for the week. First is from Swami Sarvapriyananda, and he talks about understanding and contemplating death.
How do we contemplate on death? How should we approach it?
Uh-oh. Contemplate on death. Somebody asked if you contemplate death. Somebody asked Vivekananda, won't you become depressed? Swamiji thought for a moment and said, initially you might, but afterwards you'll get a tremendous sense of freedom. So contemplate on death first, the inevitability of death. Everybody, the people we knew, grandparents, parents, they have gone or are on the way of going out. As we grow, very soon we realize we're already past the prime. Whatever nice had to happen more or less has happened. Nothing very fantastic is going to happen now. It's going to be like this. Yeah. You say, how depressing? No, it's depressing only if I'm foolish. I was looking for something in this life to happen which would make me absolutely fulfilled. This life cannot fulfill me in that way. You're asking it to do something it cannot do. Life is for experience. Bhoga and apavarga, that Prakriti says. Bhoga and apavarga. For experience, for gaining knowledge and finally gaining illumination. Life itself cannot provide you with happiness and fulfillment. What can provide you with happiness and fulfillment, what you really want, is this God realization or enlightenment. Proof, look at the saints of different civilizations, religions, throughout the ages. One thing common to them, they were happy. Not happy in a cartoon way with a smiley face. Profoundly, spiritually satisfied internally, no matter what the struggles of their day-to-day life. They did not complain. You've never heard of a saint who is to grumble. No. Saint means a really enlightened person. Never. That's why I say enlightenment, don't be in a hurry. You lose the right to grumble. You lose the right to complain. Aren't you supposed to be completely fulfilled? So spirituality is that which will fulfill us. So death is inevitable. We must contemplate the fact that physical death is going to come to all of us. Vivekananda put it in his powerful way. Saints die and sinners die. Emperors die and paupers die. The learned die and the ignorant die. Everybody dies. We find that we are all going towards that. There's absolutely no need to be unhappy about it. Because as I said earlier, check with this. The true you, the real you cannot die. It's only the body which will die. If we hold on to the body as I, me, mine, then shocks will come. Because it will deteriorate, it will age, it will fall apart, and it will die in our experience itself. We'll directly experience all this. Don't hold, psychologically, don't hold on to it so tightly. There's an old Vedantic story of 3 friends who were going to this party. It's called a festival, Mela in Hindi, the next village. And they're all dressed up in their finery. Now, as they went along, they were caught by dacoits, by robbers, who saw their fine silk clothes and said, "Give them to me." Now, one of them was really well built, large, and and also loved his new clothes. The second one was large, physically well built, but he was not particularly attached to the clothes. And the third one was skinny and also not particularly enamored of the new clothes. Now, who will have the greatest pain in taking off and giving away the new shirt? The first one, who is difficult to take off because he's so snug, tight fit, and also attached to it. This is the worldly person who thinks, I am the body, fully one with one's own skin. I am the body, and has not practiced spiritual disciplines. So giving up is really difficult. When in time of death, when the Lord of Death, Yamaraja, comes to snatch away the fine cloth of the body, very difficult. The second one is a person who has that Vedantic insight, the spiritual insight. I am a spirit, I am not a body. I am consciousness, I am the witness in which the body is experienced. But has not done sufficient spiritual practice, so it's not an instinctive thing. Understands, but there's a struggle to take off the cloth. He's not attached to it, but still snug fit. So third one is the one who has got the spiritual discernment and also the lifelong spiritual practice, who easily takes it off and casts it away. I have seen myself, and we have read about so many enlightened people, so many spiritual seekers, don't even say enlightened people, who have done spiritual practice throughout their life, who see themselves as spiritual seekers, at the point of death, in full awareness, in complete consciousness of God, joyfully, quietly pass away. I know some of them, I have seen, both monks and householders. It is not just at the point of death they were spiritual. They had this clarity even before that. And so they were able to deploy these spiritual resources at that spiritual crisis, in the point of physical death. So just contemplate like this. I am the witness of the body and mind. I am not this body, nor even this mind. I have had so many bodies in the past which I do not remember. Losing this body, death is like turning over a page in a book. I've read it and the next page begins. There's a song which monks sing in the main monastery in India, in Belur Math, when a monk is cremated. Usually members of the public are not allowed there. It's a Bengali song. Shishu chilam juba hoyechi. I was a child, now I'm a youth, and I will be old in some days hence. And at death, dehantare, I will get another body, and I'll be reborn as a child again. O death, what fear dost thou have for me? What fear dost thou hold for me? I have no fear of death. It's just changing one body for the other. And then he goes on. But what need do I have of newer and newer bodies and experiences? In Bengali, Gyan Rupi Shib, Ache Namaik Kole Kore. That means Shiva. But who is Shiva? Not the how we imagine in iconography, the blue god sitting on the white Himalayas, meditating with the serpent and the crescent moon, the archetype of the yogi. Gyan Rupi Shiv. No, Shiva who is consciousness. I sit in the lap of Shiva who is eternal consciousness. Basically, I am a child of consciousness. Why do I need new bodies? Why should I go through births and deaths again? So in this time, let it be for the last time. When this body goes and burns on the pyre, a funeral pyre, I am free forever. To that song monks sing. Maron ki bhoy dekhao more. Death, what fear dost thou show me? I think.
And next is Rupert Spira, and he's talking about a non dual view of karma and reincarnation.
We were sitting on the same table last evening, and you suggested to ask this question. I'm asking now to put this question now in the satsang time. I have a Buddhist background. I have been a Buddhist monk for 20 years.
Just to clarify this, I didn't suggest the question. Manfred asked me the question, and I said, please keep that.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes.
I just didn't want you to think that I was planting a question in.
Yes. So my question yesterday evening was to Rupert. He told me he is not. What did he say? He said he is out of duty.
Off duty. Yeah.
So I had to
For
ask
meals, I'm only available about talking about our favourite movies, our children.
Yes.
Not our relationships.
So this would be the time to ask the concepts of karma and rebirth. I wonder how they fit in that view of non-duality.
Okay, so I'm going to now introduce the metaphor that Jake mentioned yesterday, Bernardo Kastrup's metaphor of the whirlpool. All these different metaphors that I use, they all have that they're all have a certain explanatory power to illuminate one aspect of our experience. And this Bernardo's whirlpool metaphor is very nice in relation to past lives and future lives. And so just very briefly, the river in this analogy is consciousness, the water in the river, the flowing water. And the reason it's a flowing river and not a static lake is because in this approach, in this tantric approach that we explore here, consciousness isn't just still, silent. It also has the capacity to vibrate within itself and assume all the forms of experience. So in this analogy, the river of consciousness, the water of consciousness is flowing, moving, vibrating. And in the river, whirlpools develop. And the whirlpools are localizations of the water. You can't take a whirlpool out of the river and say, here is a whirlpool independent of the river. There is no actual thing called a whirlpool. The whirlpool is just a configuration of the only thing, if we can call it a thing, that is there, which is the water. So the whirlpool in this analogy is the finite mind, each of our minds, each of us. There is nothing to us or our experience other than the movement of consciousness. But this consciousness, in order to appear in the form of experience, localizes itself in the form of each of our minds, just as the river localizes itself as the whirlpool. That's the analogy. So when the whirlpool begins to disintegrate, the energies that went into the make of the whirlpool begin to relax and disband, and they dissolve back into the stream back into the water from which they originated, just as when our minds delocalize. And in fact, this process happens every night when we go from the very narrow, focused waking state. Our minds begin to relax and expand. They go through the dream state, they relax and expand further. They go through the personal and collective unconscious. I didn't do a very good job last night of explaining this. And then eventually they relax all the way back to the peace of deep sleep. So as the whirlpool, that is our mind, as it relaxes, it loses its form, just as at night our mind loses its form as it travels back and back and back to deep sleep. So the whirlpool loses its form, but as it loses its form, at a certain point, the integrity of the whirlpool is lost. You can no longer point and say, there is a whirlpool in the river. But nevertheless, the energies that went into the make of the whirlpool still exist in the broader medium of the river, although they are no longer gathered together with a particular form. So this, in your tradition, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, would be equivalent to a state after the death of the body, when the energies of the mind still live in some disembodied form in consciousness. They're still there in some kind of bardo state, but no longer coalesced into the form of a finite mind. Now we have the ripples, the leftover energies from the whirlpool are now just ripples floating in the river. And there's nothing to suggest that as the river flows, that these ripples will not coalesce again downstream and form another center or localization in the river. In other words, there's nothing to suggest that the ripples, the energies that were left over from the dispersal of the first whirlpool will not remain for some time in the river without a form, and later, downstream, localize again and form the basis of a new whirlpool. Now that new whirlpool will be made partly from the leftover ripples from the first whirlpool, but it will also be made of the ripples that surround it in its new location. So the new whirlpool will be a brand new whirlpool that in some respects has no relation to the previous whirlpool, but there will be some residue left over from the previous whirlpool which will go into the make of the new whirlpool. All that's there still is water. All that's there is the water of consciousness. All there is to these two whirlpools was consciousness and its activity. So this model explains how the leftover energies of the body-mind that dies and disbands into the broader medium of consciousness could remain for some time in consciousness and then gather together to form the next localization or body-mind. And that would be an interpretation of previous lives, future lives, karma, but without recourse to a separate self that reincarnates, without the idea that there is an individual self that reincarnates from lifetime to lifetime. It is more like a gathering of energies that coalesce to form the body-mind that each of us is, and then disbands, and then coalesces again.
Yeah, I wonder where are the differences coming from, from, let's say, newborn babies.
A newborn baby would be a whirlpool that is just beginning to form in the river. And as the baby grows, the whirlpool will attract to itself more and more ripples from its environment. So the whirlpool will grow both in size and in complexity. As more and more ripples from the surrounding water enter into its own body, the body of the whirlpool. That this would be how the child grows, how it is nourished by its environment physically, emotionally, mentally, and it grows, that the whirlpool grows.
Yes, it grows, but it grows very differently.
Yes, because differently from...
one can see that babies, or maybe few month old babies, they already have very different tendencies.
Yes, because the ripples that go into the make of one little whirlpool may be very different from the quality of the ripples that go into the make of another little whirlpool. For instance, you might have one, this is hugely simplified, but you might have one little baby whirlpool that begins to form in an area of the river that is very silent, just the mildest fluctuations on the surface that gather together to form this pristine, beautiful little whirlpool, whereas 20 meters downstream over the rapids, the water may be flowing in a very turbulent way, and therefore the ripples are very agitated, and therefore the baby whirlpool that forms just beyond the rapids will be made out of ripples that are very agitated, and the little whirlpool that forms will be a bundle of conflict and energy and agitation.
And the fact that it is like this, do you think it has nothing to do with the quality of the prior?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what I'm saying, that it does. Part of what goes into the make of each new whirlpool comes from the old whirlpool. Not all of it, because part of the local ripples, that is, the ripples that come from our environment, from our education, they also form the make of the new whirlpool. But let's say, for the sake of the conversation, that 50% of the new whirlpool is made up of the energies, the residual energies from the previous whirlpool, and therefore will share some of the characteristics of the previous whirlpool. So what the previous whirlpool thought about and felt and did during its life, which will be translated into ripples, will go into the make of the new whirlpool.
All right. Next is Nome. Nome's talk is always.
That which you truly are, you are always. Not only is that immutable, it is eternal. What of you is eternal? What has a beginning and an end, a birth and a death, cannot be your very existence. For existence does not cease to exist at any time. Evidently, that cannot be the body, which has a beginning and an end. If your real nature is bodiless, what is it? What has a beginning and an end? In other words, that which is not eternal is merely a false appearance and not the reality of your being. Who are you? Thought is not eternal. It is momentary. What you are is always. If you are neither the perceptible nor the conceivable, what are you? The Upanishads declare that the self is Brahman. And Sri Bhagavan, Ribhu, Adi Shankara, and others have proclaimed the nature of the self to be Satchidananda, being, consciousness, bliss. If you know yourself, therefore, Brahman knows Brahman, God knows God. To know yourself, inquire deeply within. At the depth of your very existence, who am I? Such inquiry brings a cessation to the imaginary conception of differentiation, such as Jagat Jiva Para, the universe, the individual, and the supreme. In the eternal, as the eternal, one finds complete peace and illimitable joy. Such are of your very nature. If you mistake yourself to be a limited embodied individual, then with such misidentification, bondage seems to be, and being bound, the innate happiness appears veiled, and such is a state of suffering. To be free of the suffering, liberate yourself from bondage. To become unbound, cease to misidentify. To cease to misidentify, inquire, who am I? As all forms are seen to perish, the eternal must be formless. Your very existence is formless. What is formless cannot possibly be multiple. Differentiation is only among imagined forms. Thus, if you have a form, or seem to have a form, likewise God and the world. If you are the eternal, pure existence, consciousness, bliss, there is no question of form or of differentiation. There is only one homogeneous, boundless, beginningless, endless, pure existence. And that is what you are. The self is only one. Your existence is invariably singular. There cannot be two selves, an eternal one and a transient one. A real self and a false self. An absolute self, or Brahman, and an individualized self. If you inquire to know yourself, penetrating the very heart of the apparently individualized existence, you will find only Brahman, the absolute self, which is one without a second, for all eternity. The interior, silent, direct experience of this, without cessation, is steady abidance, or true knowledge.
So now let us take some time and meditate, inquire within ourselves. Breathe in and breathe out. Long, slow breaths. Notice the breath as it comes in, as it goes out. Now just notice that you exist. You exist, and you know that you exist. Now inquire, investigate within yourself, within your actual experience right now. How do you know that you exist? When I ask, do you exist? Where within yourself do you look to see? Do you look to your senses? Do you look to your mind? Or do you look to this indefinable sense of being that is always there? How do you know that you exist? Who am I? What is the nature of this existence? All right, let's close with a chant. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Peace, peace, peace. If this satsang was of interest to you, I have more for you: a free book site, a YouTube site, and my blog. The URLs will be on the screen next. And in the following weeks, we will continue with this Satgam series based on Ramana Maharshi's seminal teaching, 40 Verses on Reality. Thank you for letting me share this teaching with you.